So we are live now on YouTube.
All right, welcome everyone. So this is the PAB meeting for June 25th, 2020. I'm welcoming you all and I'm calling the meeting to order now. So we are going to have, we welcome Chief Singletary. Thank you so much for coming to meet with us today. And then we're going to, I'm gonna pass on the next agenda item to Board Member Powell.
Hi, everyone. Hello.
Oops, sorry, that's the wrong agenda.
Oh yeah, that just didn't all. All right, so thanks, Madam Chair Wilson. Thanks everybody for participating. Welcome, Chief Singletary. On behalf of the Police Accountability Board, we would like to offer our condolences to Rochester Police Lieutenant Aaron Coletti. We would also like to extend our condolences to the families of 4 homicide victims last week in the city of Rochester. Trent Cook, Ricardo Stone, Willie Carter, and my childhood friend from Wells Street, Paris, Washington. The families of everyone we lost recently, please accept our condolences. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So it is 6:36. So I guess we can start with talking with Chief Singletary and asking him some of our questions. So
Chair Wilson, we have the minutes that we have to.
Oh, yep. So we have some approval of the minutes.
They were sent to everyone in advance. I can put them up on the screen if that would be helpful.
Thank you.
Madam Chairperson.
Yep.
We've all had a chance to look at the minutes. If anyone has any corrections, I'd let them speak up, but I move that the meetings be adopted with any necessary corrections.
All right. I have moved that before. Second?
And I would second.
Okay. All right. So we are going to move the approve the minutes. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Any, does anybody not want to approve the minutes, or are there any abstentions? None. Okay, minutes are approved. Okay. What the heck? Okay, folks, so now we can go ahead and, unless there's anything else we wanted to talk about, but we would like to welcome again Chief Singletary to our meeting, and we can start with our questions.
So Chief Singletary, this is Dr. McIntosh, and I want to thank you for being here today. We really appreciate your time. We know there's many things that you could be doing on this wonderful Thursday night, but thank you for being here. So we want to start off with a question with Board Member Perez.
So Chief Singletary, I know everyone has welcomed you, but I wanted to personally welcome you. And thank you for being here with us tonight. I know that one of the reasons why I wanted to be part of the PAB, not just for having some Latino representation, but also because I've had the opportunity to work with you and your department in many different areas in the Northeast area, you know, with Project Hope, Project Clean, No Mas, PACTAC, the Scranton Street Block Club. And so, and I personally have experienced the collaboration that you bring to the table. We've met many times, sometimes in my office, about complaints and concerns that we've had. And, I felt that you've always come with, the mindset of collaborating and resolving those issues. And so my question really is, how much of that collaboration can we expect from you for the PAB board as we continue to work on this and develop our board as the community has expected?
Thank you, Ada. Thanks for having me, to the entire board. I know some of you I don't know, but I think I had many interactions with some of you out in public. And I think, as you said, Ida, my track record, I think, kind of speaks for itself. And I'm always willing to sit down and work with anyone. I'm always prepared to listen to the tough questions, but my hope and more importantly, I think, are people prepared to listen to the answers to those tough questions, even if some of the answers are that, answers they do not want to hear. Again, I think what it boils down to is, having clearly defined roles as to what, our jobs entail. And I think we've done that over, many of our conversations that we've had, what we're charged with and a path as to how to work together to accomplish the mission. And I think as long as the mission is clearly defined, I think that, we can certainly try to work together on such. As you know, throughout this process, I personally have not been involved in the formation of the Police Accountability Board. And quite frankly, I don't know if I even probably should have a process with regard to that, considered to be a fair process, given that the board can, particularly if the board has authority to investigate the chief of police. But again, I'm willing to sit down and discuss with anyone as to what I consider the role of policing to be. And I think that's been my track record for such.
Thank you.
Okay.
Cecilia, you still there, or should I just go?
I don't know what's happening.
She's
So
muted.
the second question goes to Board Member Powell.
Okay, thank you. Welcome again, Chief. It's nice to finally meet you. I don't know in the world of the new normal if this is considered an actual meeting or not, but thanks for coming. My question is, one pillar of the Police Accountability Board would be to have granted the PAB disciplinary powers, in which we may be able to discipline officers who were found guilty of misconduct after investigation of a citizen complaint. My question is, do you support the PAB having such disciplinary authority of officers? Can you please answer why you do support it or why you do not support it?
Yeah, I think much of the conversation tonight is going to be about enacting change within law enforcement. But I think for any chief executive officer to have the ability to enact change, whether you're the CEO who's overseeing a law enforcement agency or a Fortune 500 company or a small business, and I think the CEO must have the authority that comes along with the responsibility to enact that change. So I think part of such is, obviously there's state law that regards what authorities that police departments have and what authority does accountability boards have. I think that's still being litigated. I think as we, continue to maneuver through this process, the court has, I think, made a decision, but I know that process is still being litigated as such. So, that's my personal take on it. If you want someone to kind of, have the responsibility to enact change, and I think that's what I think much of the conversation is about across the country. And I think if you're a chief executive officer, you have to have that authority that goes along with that.
So if I understand you, you're saying you're leaning more towards not supporting it?
I think it's still being litigated, so I can't really say with regard to such specifically. The court has made a decision on such with regard to laws that were enacted, Taylor law, collective bargaining agreements. But again, my personal belief is that if one is charged to have the responsibility to enact change, I think that's some of the things that we've heard across this country. A person who is in a position of authority needs to have the authority to enact that change.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Chief. So the next question goes to Board Member Harvey.
Hello, Chief.
How are
I'm Ricky Harvey in Rochester. I'm happy to be serving as a member of the Police Accountability Board. I was happy to be appointed by the mayor and see ourselves serving as personally friends of the police who help hold friends accountable. And one of the questions that I have is, what steps will you take to ensure members of the Rochester Police Department will cooperate with the Police Accountability Board in working with us to develop a disciplinary matrix? And follow up with that is giving us access to training and procedural materials that will be taking place as such.
Well, good question. As I stated earlier, I'm willing to sit down and work with anybody in the community, to include the Police Accountability Board. I think when you talk about what am I going to do, I think it's a responsibility that should not only be upon the police department, but also the entire community and the boards that are like. I mean, it shouldn't be this us versus them mentality. I think that kind of has to stop. I think what you have to understand, the police have a role, the community has a role, and I think it must be collaborative. And I think we're trying to figure out and determine the role of the Police Accountability Board. So like I said earlier, I haven't been involved in much of the formation of the Police Accountability Board, and I think we're still trying to determine what that role actually is. But as far as me, I think part of the change that requires engaging in dialogue and inviting people to the table to include all aspects of law enforcement, the community, and those entities that regulate such, right? I think I do that every day. Police officers do that every day. Each encounter that we have with the public, we go out there and it's seen as an encounter where each one can teach one, right? But what we should not lose sight of are the things that we have worked on in the city of Rochester, specifically related to, the Rochester Police Department and the community that we serve here. I have been and always will be willing to sit down and talk to anyone. I think this question itself kind of illustrates the behavior of us sitting down right now. Again, this is the first time that I think I've sat down with you all. And, I think as long as we, again, identify those roles that we have, and I think that must be clearly identified and what the mission is going to be for the Police Accountability Board and the Rochester Police Department.
And clearly identified, you could see us working together to develop some disciplinary matrix and the types.
Yeah, I think, I think that's what we have to determine what that process is going to be like. Certainly it's going to have to involve the collective bargaining agreement, the locus club as such. And I think that the courts have made a ruling on that. And I think that's where we have to see where we go from there. And that such is being litigated right now. So I think, again, that goes back to defining the roles of the Police Accountability Board and how we can kind of work together. But until such litigation is kind of hammered out and defining such roles and what the Police Accountability Board can do outside of what the judges kind of already render, I think that's where we kind of stand.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Chief. We appreciate your willingness to engage and have dialogue with the community, the PAB, and we appreciate your willingness to collaborate. So thank you. So the next question, the next question goes to Board Member Settle.
You're muted, Tora.
Thanks. Something I hear a lot, both online and in personal conversations with police officers, is that civilians just don't get it about police experience. And so I'm wondering if you could, and my response to that is to say, so tell us, right? What do we need to know? So I would like to ask you, what are some things maybe at the top of your list of what you think that members of this board need to know about policing in Rochester?
Well, I think what the board needs to know that policing in Rochester should not be judged or compared to other entities across the country. There are about 18,000 police departments across this country. Each of them have their own standards. And I think even there's a call to push for national standards to standardize some of the what we have currently across the country. But across those 18,000 police departments, there are individual states that they occupy within. And each of those states have various laws, state laws and local municipalities of such. What I would say is that the Rochester Police Department has made great strides to form relationships with our community here. We work with clergy, we work with community members, we work with community organizations. In 2018, when I became the deputy chief, the mayor charged me with coming up with a community policing plan. We created the Community Affairs Bureau here in Rochester to try to extend the olive branch to many individuals in this community, not just in times of crisis, but when there is nothing going on. I think that's the best time to form some sort of communication. I would say to the board is that I would say you have to keep an open mind as to what policing is and what policing is not. And that open mind has to be objective, it has to be unbiased, and you have to understand really the role of what police officers do each and every day. And you have to have a willingness to learn as much as possible about policing. Police officers have a difficult job, particularly within this environment. One of the things as chief of police that I worry about is, am I giving my police officers the necessary knowledge, skills, and abilities to go out there and do their job? Because we're asking so much more of our police officers today due to other entities receiving, whether it be cuts beyond control of the local municipality that we're in, to include like mental health services, social services, education. And when those cuts happen, you have real consequences that often, end up in the laps of police departments. So, I think as we begin to have conversations about, what does policing look like in the future, I think there are certain things that we need to kind of take into account when you talk about, what does policing look like in the future. But, I think we made great strides here. And I think, just like any other profession, we always look to improve. That's one of the things that, I've been doing here in Rochester since I took over as chief. Accountability, transparency. Obviously, our job is crime reduction and community engagement and professional development. And that's one thing I think we do well here in Rochester. And I think that's why we do invest in our police department. And you don't see a lot of the other issues that other departments may have across the country. Are we perfect? No. As I said earlier, and even last year when a police accountability board discussion came about, was any agency that believes that it does not need any type of oversight is an agency that's already failed. And I know as chief sitting here in the position that I do sit, I take the responsibility seriously. So, that's what I would want in a nutshell, members of the PAB to know about the Rochester Police Department, is that, you have to judge us on, what we have done in our community and not so much on, what people are talking about, what we should be doing, but we have to look at what we have done here in Rochester as well and make sure that we don't compare and judge ourselves to other entities across the country.
Thank you.
I just wanted to piggyback off that real quick about the community policing. Is there any data that you're collecting for that program, and to look back and see if that's working, or just going forward, if there's anything you can do differently specific to that program?
Yeah, well, a lot of things that we're doing is collecting some sort of qualitative data when we go out into the community. Because again, one of the things that we want to do is make sure we want to get feedback from people in the community, not just in times of crisis, but when there's nothing going on as well. So we're looking at ways to always collect data and be transparent as possible. We're getting ready to start up a mobile trauma unit within the city of Rochester that will provide services. And part of that will be tracking some of the data, as we talked last night on the Rochester Against Gun Violence call last night about tracking data. I think Dr. McIntosh was part of that discussion as well. So yes.
All right, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So our next question goes to Chairwoman Wilson.
Hello. Okay, so one of the things that that kind of stuck out to me that you said is about we are asking the police to do so much more than we used to. So my background is that before I became a physician assistant, I worked in emergency medical services here in Rochester. And I also worked in Irondequoit, and I worked in Gates Child Ag. So that's my background. I also worked in emergency medicine and RGH for a little bit. So one of the things I think is, I've been around a lot of officers over the years, and I've responded to a lot of calls over the years. And, one of the things we talk about is, about response to traumatic events and response to, some of the things that you're seeing on a day-to-day basis. And, we talk about vicarious trauma, like we talk about the initial trauma being like a stone in the water, and then the vicarious trauma being the ripples that you see in the water, right? And, we talk about vicarious trauma being also how it affects officer families and also EMS families, and also, people in the community or people in the medical community like myself and Celia. So, I guess one of my questions for you would be, how do you, and what is the current, like, how are you helping your officers deal with some of this vicarious trauma that they're seeing on a day-to-day basis? Before you answer, I also want to say, though, that it is about, when you experience trauma like what we see on a daily basis, it affects you and it takes its toll not on you, but on your family and also on the citizens that you protect, right? Because if you see a person who is wearing the same red sweater of somebody who you just responded to a domestic violence call, and they have that sweater on, you can't tell me that when you see the same situation over time that you're not going to be traumatized by it. So I'm just curious about what that response looks like so far and how you take care of officers that are starting to exhibit signs.
Well, it's a good question. And it's a hard question to answer because it's constantly evolving and it's very complex. There are many things that can lead to stress in the policing environment, right? Just the climatic environment that we are currently in. There are mandates from police administrations that are placed on personnel. The societal pressures, the constant balancing, dealing with the ever-changing expectations of the public, what the public expects of the police departments, right? And there's what I just had a conversation about this the other day about the inconsistency of policing ideologies. But being a police officer today alone is a tough job in and of itself. But what we do know is that you mentioned, if we don't take care of our police officers, how can we expect them to go out there and perform at their best and provide a quality of service to the public, right? So after critical incidents, we require follow-ups for our officers. Critical incident can be a shooting or something that we deem that the officers just typically may not see every day. We know that trauma builds up over time as well. It does not necessarily have to be one particular incident. So we do have officer assistance program, and if you look at our general order number 211 on our open data portal, it provides a myriad of services related to, it could be range from marriage counseling, family counseling, adolescent counseling, chemical dependency, and then critical incident. If an officer is involved in a very stressful situation or shooting. So, and these services can be either voluntary or self-referral, except when it's a critical incident where we require mandatory referral services for critical incidents. And after critical incident, an officer sees a clinician immediately after the incident that night. And then there's a 2-week follow-up, there's a 6-week follow-up, and then there's a 1-year follow-up. As you know, and then also other counseling as directed by the chief or his designee. At the same time, when an officer is involved in a critical incident, for example, let's say an officer involved shooting, the officer starts the process to be evaluated, can start the process to be evaluated by a departmental psych doctor. As such, can be a very traumatic event. So it's not lost on us, particularly when you talk about the last, you look at last year, you look at the number of incidents, suicides that New York City Police Department had, they were going across the country. Yep. So, we are looking at programs like peer-to-peer programs. Some of our departments locally have peer-to-peer programs where officers can talk with one another. And we also encourage our supervisors to kind of look out and see if there are things that are going on within our officers that we can kind of be proactive and take a proactive approach on, right? But again, none of us are clinicians. We just kind of go by what the experience of the job kind of tells us and what our human interactions kind of tell us. I know when a buddy is off, or I know when a buddy is not, being themselves. So yeah, I mean, it's very important. And I think, we have mechanisms in place and we're always looking to get better as to how we can kind of ensure that our officers receive the best type of mental health and wellness out there.
There's so much more to say, but I won't. Thank you.
It's a very complex issue.
Isn't it?
My turn, Celia.
Oh, hold on one second. So the next question goes to Board Member Nikoloff.
Good evening, Chief. Good to see you again. It was nice to see you a few weeks ago at the Liberty Poll with Rise Up Rochester, and I understand that they're doing their thing right now. So sorry that we can't be there tonight. I'm a clergy person. In a way, you are the shepherd of your flock, as you mentioned, not only the CEO, but also you have some moral and even, I would say, some spiritual authority over your people. And as someone who's in the business of religion, we've seen how changing cultural attitudes towards religion in particular have shifted majorly over the last couple decades. Many talk about the decline of Christianity in the country, and that takes its toll not only on members of churches, but also on clergy, right, on leaders, to understand that we're no longer seen as kind of, along with doctors and lawyers, as kind of, the respected folks in many communities. I understand that there's a lot of changing attitudes as exhibited by the events, certainly of the last 3 to 4 weeks, changing attitudes about the role of police officers in our culture, in our society. And I'm less interested in how you're going to help the public see the police, but I'm interested, how are you going to help your officers and adapt to changing attitudes towards law enforcement? What specific issues do you think are most pressing for them? What challenges do they face in facing this changing attitude? And what's your plan for helping them to face, accept, and adapt to the needed changes in police culture, both within the department in particular, amongst your people? How are we going to deal with the interior police culture, not just to say the words to the public, but also to make sure that there is a change in the heart of the department?
Yeah, so I think you do that by action. I think you do it by action. Like you said, it has to go beyond dialogue. You have to do it by action. Many of my fellow colleagues across the county, we talk about, like exactly what you said, piercing the hearts. And that's exactly what the sheriff talks about, piercing the hearts and changing the culture within. It's a very complex issue. The history of policing and the traditions of policing are hundreds and hundreds of years old, right? So it's not going to happen overnight. These things did not occur overnight. So we can't expect the change to happen overnight. I think what we have to do is we have to take a holistic look, and we have to have individuals who are part of the discussion from the community and from many other entities. And we have to allow them to have a seat at the table. We also, we're going to be engaging in some town halls, myself and as well as other chiefs across the county, engaging some town halls with individuals in our community. And I think that's going to be an important step. I know the mayor and the county executive have also formed a commission to look at a number of things that can look at a number of issues with regard to recruitment. You can look at a number of issues with regard to, how we currently operate as a police department. So I think it's again, to sit here and answer that, I think we need to do a lot of research. We need to look at data, and we need to look at the historical context of policing. Again, it's not an easy answer to that. We have policies and procedures, but so did every other department. So did every other department that had issues, and so some of the things that we're seeing across the country that is bringing this reform to place. So do policies and procedures prevent any and everything? Absolutely not. But the answer to your question is not an easy one, and it's not one that I can answer in 1 minute, 5 minutes, probably even an hour. But it's going to take dialogue. It's going to take people wanting to sit down at a table and ask those tough questions. And it's going to take individuals from our rank and file, not just the chief, not just the police department, not just the community, but every single body within the rank and file. And we have to have some sort of dialogue and buy-in to that as well. But it's not going to happen overnight. We need the data, we need research, and we need the experts to kind of look and see what we can kind of do when it comes to policing.
Just to piggyback on that, just to probe, the last election taught us a lot about locker room talk. Could you identify one particular issue that happens, say, at the level of the locker room or the water cooler, that you think needs to change in order to help renew from within? We know about the big systemic issues. We understand that's complicated. In our department here, what are some of the everyday ways that you think the department could improve, and how would you help to do that in terms of interior culture?
Well, I think one of the things that we're doing is looking at transparency. We post all of our general orders, policies, and procedures on the open data portal. I think one of the other big things that, we talk about reform, the repeal of 50A. I always said that when someone files a complaint, when the Police Accountability Board was established, I always said that when someone files a complaint, but they want to know what happened with regard to the outcome of that complaint. And you know, that if that removes the anonymity with regard to bringing the divide closer, then I think it's a good thing, right? Transparency is a good thing, but I think there needs to be recourses in place if we find out that the things that we have enacted, we need to have an avenue to go back and fix things that may be unintended consequences of our, you know, putting things into place so quickly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chief, I think the community really appreciates the engagement and the town hall, so we thank you for doing that. But you brought up Repeal 50A, and I just wanted to know going forward, is there a mechanism in place? Will that be something, finding that information out, will that be on the open data portal? How will the public have access to that information?
I think many police departments are exploring that right now. You know, I think a lot of police departments have received FOIL requests for data. It's going to be a cumbersome process. It's going to be, I mean, some people are asking for records of every single member in a department. I mean, you have departments as large as New York City that has over 30,000 police officers, and our department has 728 police officers. So everyone's working on it. Everyone's consulting. I think their law departments and attorneys to figure out what actually is the intent of the law and how it's written. I think there are even people who are asking for things who do not even know what they're asking for. So I think departments are looking at ways, and I just had a meeting yesterday with our law department to explore, you know, how can we meet what the state is asking departments to meet. So it's a very, another complex issue that's happening fast. And at the same time, there are no, you know, additional funding or resources coming along with that. So we are trying to do the best that we can to try to meet the mandates of the state.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it. Okay, so the next question comes from me, and I just wanted to, you said something about the RPD has made great strides to reform with relationships, and that we have to have open-mindedness. And one of the questions that I've been exploring over the last few weeks, we've been looking at policies, procedures, processes from other review boards throughout various states. During this research, one of the police officers that I talked to in Albany, Georgia, he mentioned that there was a citizens review board that was a part of his interview process. So my question to you, how would the RPD be open to having members of the PAB participate in the interview process for new police officers or new police applicants entering the field?
Yeah, so I think this is part of the discussion as to relative to what the role of the PAB is, you know, and I think, you know, obviously, as I said earlier, there's ongoing litigations to defining what the clear role of the Police Accountability Board actually is. And I think that is something for, you know, obviously you all, the Police Accountability Board and the courts to kind of determine what the actual role is. And I think once that has been determined by the courts, I think that's where we can kind of have those conversations as to what involvement the PAB will actually have in any type of process, particularly when it comes to hiring. But, you know, I'm not in a position to say right now as to what role the Police Accountability Board will have in any type of interviewing of police officers at this point, because I don't think it's really clearly defined as to the role of the Police Accountability Board.
Thank you. So the next question goes to board member Bob or Harrison, Dr. Harrison.
Thank you. Hello, Chief.
Hello.
You and Shani got into an interesting conversation where you spent a fair amount of time very eloquently talking about the impact of stress on your officers. And it just occurred to me that that stress probably cuts both ways. And my question basically has to do with, is prompted by what happened a few weeks ago with the 10-year-old that's been talked about a lot. The thing that concerns me is what general orders do you have that cover the handling of minors? And you said that the particular incident in question wasn't covered by the general orders. So do you have any plans to expand and improve the orders in this area? And in terms of expertise dealing with children, have you discussed these orders with anyone from an organization like Child Protective Services?
Well, so we have a myriad of general orders that cover handling of minors. We have general orders that regulate the handling of such. We have temporary detention orders. We have general orders that deal with warrants for adults and juveniles. We have juvenile procedures, a whole general order on such as to how to deal and process juveniles. We have a general order that deals with child abuse, also issuance of parents' tickets. And we have training bulletins as relative to statements, questions, and runaways of that. We work with Child Protective Services, but we don't consult with them on policy and procedures of the Rochester Police Department. Obviously we have a working relationship with CPS, but no, we wouldn't consult with CPS on particular general orders relative to the Rochester Police Department.
Where do you get your information about children?
I'm sorry?
Where do you get your information about children?
What do you mean? Be more specific when you say information about children.
How they behave, what to do with them.
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Who are your experts in children?
Well, I think that's part of the discussion. I think that's part of this conversation you have when we talk about should police be the primary agency responding to certain incidents across, our police officers equipped to deal with, incidents that we may not be properly trained for. But one thing that police officers are able to do is adapt, right? But I'll be the first to say, I don't know if we want police officers adapting when it comes to on-the-job training. When I first came on the job, I was 20 years old. I responded to family troubles. I responded to domestics, people who were probably married twice my age, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I did not know how to handle the situation. So I think when you say, who will we consult, I'm not really sure I kind of understand the question relative to our dealings with youth. I mean, there's no manual that teaches me how to deal with it. No, I understand what you're asking.
There are numerous agencies within Monroe County that are made up of people who care for children every day, that know what to do with an upset child.
Right, and we do work with those agencies. We have our FACET, we have Family and Crisis Intervention team that we have within our own police department. We work with the Office of Mental Health within Monroe County. We work with other organizations such as NAMI, and we also work with those entities, social workers, where we respond to if they're available. So, I'm not sure if, again, I'm not really understanding. I understand what you're saying, but doesn't this necessarily not say that we don't know how to deal with children when we interact with them? We have many programs within the Rochester Police Department where we deal with children.
Thank you. I much appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you.
Dr. McIntosh, if you're still speaking, you have been muted.
Sorry. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
So I want to say thank you for coming, Chief. We're almost at the end here of our questions, and I want to turn it over to Chairwoman Wilson so she can close it out.
Okay. So Chief, a lot of folks are watching this talk right now. And what would you like the public to know about the recent events, especially around excessive force and defunding the police? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think when you talk about excessive force, we'll talk about the incident that happened in Minneapolis, right? I think every chief that Friday got together and we committed and put a statement out with regard to such. I think when you see what happened in Minneapolis, for me, I came out and said it did not coincide with the values of policing, the principles of policing that we believe in. You know, I always say, you know, good cops, you know, make mistakes, bad cops make excuses. And, you know, I don't think there's any police officer who saw what happened in Minneapolis. You know, if you hold true to the values of the policing profession and what the principles of the policing profession are, I don't see how anyone can say that that incident was just, right? So when it comes to excessive force, you know, it's one of those incidents that, you know, we have to look at a case-by-case basis, but it should not be tolerated, particularly when you talk about an incident of that magnitude. I think I made it clear when you talk about defunding of the police, what does that definition really mean? There's a couple of definitions that are out there, but for me, you know, when you take away funding from the police, I think you have to be very careful. You have to, when you invest in a police department, I think that limits some of the instances that we've seen across the country from occurring, because you are investing in that police department, you are investing in the training, you are investing in that knowledge and skills and abilities that I talked about earlier, that you want to give your police officers and equip them with the best, you know, tools, go out there and do the job that they need to do with dealing with the public. And I think when you invest in them, that's what keeps departments from off the front pages of headlines and articles. So, you know, I'm not defunding the police. I'm about reform and sitting down at the table to see how we can kind of provide a better quality of service to our public. And I think that's what we've done in Rochester. You know, like I said, we talk about what, you know, we can do, what we can do based on, I think, what other departments and we've seen across the country. But I think we have to take a real hard look at, you know, the issues here in Rochester. We have to, you know, talk about specifics and not generalities.
Thank you for that. But yes, that's one of the things that I wanted to say is, you know, while we're talking about Minnesota, people will say this is a Rochester problem too. So we don't want people to think that, you know, it's over there and not here as well. So we thank you for clearing that up. So I'm turning it back over to Chairwoman Wilson.
So I think we were slated to 7:30. Folks, right. So I know that there are some, we open it up for questions and comments. So I like the idea. I'm sorry?
If the chief had any questions for us.
Chief, you have any questions for us?
I don't.
Yeah.
So I guess I'll pose one more question to you. This is Celia again. So if you had a magic wand, per se, is there anything that you would change specifically right now in the community that would help collaboration, or what would specifically, I know you mentioned some priorities earlier, but more specifically, if you had that magic wand, what would you do right now in the community?
I would say that, you know, you want people to sit down from the table from one another and engage in dialogue. And I think that there are sometimes people who are not willing to engage in dialogue and don't want to have those conversations. And I think we have to not only ask tough questions, but be prepared for the answers that might come along with those tough questions. And those answers we may not, you know, be wanting to accept, but at least we can kind of get it from the table and understand where each other is coming from. And hopefully have that some sense of understanding. And I think that's what we got to do. We got to be able to see each other for, you know, and understand where each other is coming from. And I think as long as we continue to sit on the sidelines, nothing's going to change. But we need to be able to push the envelope forward. We push the envelope forward by having conversations, dialogue, and then action that follows. So that's what I would, you know, would hope for if I had a magic wand, because I think that's where the real work gets done.
Thank you.
So may I please, Chief, I'm pastor of Mount Olivet Baptist Church, and there are several religious leaders who are connected to this Police Accountability Board. And I'm just wondering, are there ways that houses of worship, churches, synagogues, temples can work with department to help the police department with our city? Are there ways that we could collaborate?
Yes. So, we do that. We work, I'm on the board of the Levine Center in Haiti with the Jewish Federation. We work with the Jewish Federation. We have our clergy on patrol. I work with Flower City chaplains. And I work with numerous pastors within our police departments. When we have critical incidents, they come out to our critical incidents and talk with officers. The Flower City chaplains are a component within the agency that I started about a year ago. And they come out and their concern is about the wellness of the officer. Then we have our clergy response team that works with us as well. When we have homicides in the community or when we have critical incidents in the community, they come out. So we have a myriad of ways that churches can get involved. I work with, I can think of a number of pastors that we work with, where we do our project tips and our community-based outreach programs. We also recruit at various churches in the community. We talk about recruiting and wanting to reach out to individuals. As you know, the current climate that we're in, where we talk about recruitment, it's tough. It's tough right now to recruit. Before COVID-19, the economy was doing great. And then also we're battling against the perception that social media kind of puts out there as well. But I think one of the things that we can do is work with our community and provide that perspective to say that if you are willing to get into this profession by doing the right thing, that this is still a noble profession. And you can kind of help serve the community in which you grew up or what you are a part of now. So there are a number of ways that we look for opportunity within. And I've had so many people reach out to my office within the last couple of weeks who have said that they want to not just sit on the sideline anymore, and they want to take more of an active role and help mend the relationships between the community and the police. And like I said, I'm all for it. I'm willing to sit down with any and everybody to do so.
Okay.
Thank you. Any last minute questions?
I have a kind of a question. So we talked a little bit about, mending fences, and we talked about making sure that there's transparency and, that there's a greater cry from the community as far as making sure that they are heard, and that, some of these police policies and procedures that Dr. Harrison talked about are looked at a little bit closer. I know that, Spectrum News came out with the footage of the 10-year-old that was handcuffed. And, one of the things I think that really concerned me about the video when I watched it was that, the officer at one point gave the child 1 second to comply. And, we hadn't had a chance to see it. So that was the first I had seen of it. And so I think, when you give it, I just didn't, 1 second is not enough to ask of anyone. So I was wondering if, since I know that there's been a community concern surrounding the new footage that was bringing out. Do you have, number one, is that case closed? And would you consider reopening that based on that footage alone because of that? I mean, that's my question.
Well, I can't speak specifically to that case with regard to there might be some possible litigation that might be occurring here. So I just can't speak to that.
Okay.
Anyone else?
All right, so it's about 7:23 and we want to be respectful of your time, Chief. And once again, we want to thank you for being here today and your willingness to collaborate and to have this conversation with us.
Thank you, Doctor. Appreciate it.
We look forward to more conversations like this.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, folks, so we are going to move into executive session so we can start discussing the executive director position and some of the things that we have to address there.
Chair Wilson, if you don't mind, may make a brief statement before you go in so that folks that may be streaming this online, I know it was advertised, understand the process. The Police Accountability Board is able to go into executive session to discuss personnel matters. Specifically, in this case, you're going to be talking about specific resumes, specific grading criteria, and questions that may be asked of candidates. And as such, the video stream that is on YouTube will be, it'll end, and then we will rejoin when the executive session is done, though it will likely only be for several minutes to adjourn the meeting officially. I just wanted that to be out there so that folks understood the process.
Thank you, BJ.
I can second that we move into
Okay.
executive session.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay.
One moment as I end the YouTube stream.